It's Monday, June 3rd, 2013. I'm Rim.
I'm Scott.
And this is Geeknights. Tonight, testing.
Let's do this. That's
Was
good.
that better?
Yeah,
Was that a better opening?
Yeah, you didn't say a bunch of extra words for no reason.
Tonight on Geeknights, test-driven development testing,
doesn't
unit
matter
test,
now.
quality assurance.
We're already past that part.
User
so you can say
acceptance
whatever as many
testing.
words as you want now. It's the opening bit.
Pre-production staging.
Opening bit has no word limit, so it's all good.
No word limit, eh?
There's a time limit, not a word limit.
So,
Get Micro Machines guy in here, he'll show you.
I'll say this. I wonder if we could get him on Geeknights.
Is he dead?
He's probably... I can't imagine he's still alive.
Hold on. I'll look it up. You
okay,
talk.
So I enjoyed, because I do not enjoy the Game of Thrones books, but I do enjoy the story of Game of Thrones to a degree. Kind of like how I think the Harry Potter books are written for imbeciles, but I really like the story of Harry Potter. I just can't read those books.
I don't know. I can't read them either, but I kind of like a few of the, like that bother thing.
Exactly.
That was okay.
Oh, no, but that's the fan stuff.
Yeah.
The fan stuff is
I mean,
hit or
that could have
miss.
been it didn't have to be Harry Potter, right? Anything with bother would have been funny.
Basically, that's just fan fiction, what you like there.
Well, it's really just that one
But that
thing
one
they
thing
say.
is
It's
that
really
not-
not even the whole thing. It's just, what it could have been any character. It could have been like any puppet going, bother, just saying that.
But is
sort of like
that-
badger, mushroom.
It was still fan fiction.
I suppose.
Anyway, but no, I like the story. I just don't like her writing. So Game of Thrones, same thing. If I'd never read The Prince of Nothing and any other sort of serious, gritty fantasy, I might have more tolerance for the Game of Thrones, but I have no tolerance for it.
At
But the
least
show,
it's Game of Thrones that's popular and not In the Name of the Wind.
oh my God.
Imagine if that was the TV series. That
Scott, you didn't read that second book.
I own it, though.
Yeah, that was a mistake. You want to read about a lot of sex with kung fu ninja masters who have very liberal attitudes on sex?
No, because as soon as I finish the book I'm reading now, I'm going to go back to reading the comics that are piling up everywhere.
But I saw the title of the upcoming episode of Game of Thrones. I've only watched season 1 of the show. I liked it.
Watched episode 0, not any episodes
It's
ever.
a good show. It's one of those things where
I played
work...
the board game.
I've played the board game too. It's an okay game.
I've heard comments about game, and I basically have just gleaned a small amount of knowledge about it from sources.
What you came to when we got here and we started the show, you were like, so what the fuck happened?
Right, because basically the internet exploded today, right? And everyone's talking about, oh my God, Game of Thrones last night, crazy shit went down, and they're freaking out, and they're talking about this red wedding, and I couldn't really find anyone actually describing what happened because everyone's so fucking spoiler averse.
Yep.
Right? And I'm like, okay, red wedding, so there must have been a wedding. Based on what I know about the show, there must have been a wedding, and a lot of, someone was killed at it, or maybe a bunch of people were killed at it, or the bride was killed, or there was killing going on at this wedding. Perhaps, I'm guessing, because I know in the show it's a medieval world with houses. I know that from the board game. Perhaps this was a wedding between two houses, and perhaps a third house did not like it. I'm guessing. And then I also know the other thing I know about the show is that there are dragons and a midget. So perhaps the dragons ate the midget at the wedding.
So if you ever do watch the show, and I wouldn't recommend reading the novels, the midget is probably your favorite character. I wish the show...
I know what I know of the midget is from your...
Goonies Game of Thrones?
Yes.
The thing is, the actual speech he gives in that video...
Well, you showed me that also.
...is basically the same as the Goonies speech.
Right, you showed me that also, so...
I knew what the Red Wedding was because much like with Harry Potter, I read all the spoilers for the books because I don't want to read the books.
Oh, so you found them. So tell me what the Red Wedding is.
No, I read the spoilers for the books when the book came out and that shit happened.
Oh, well, tell me what the fucking Red Wedding is.
So I won't spoil it for our listeners, but basically you're right in a sense. But basically the show is known.
Once you know, like, there's a thing called a Red Wedding and there's houses, I mean.
The show is known and the books are known for two things. One, they will kill main characters out of nowhere.
Okay, good.
Which is
but they have
interest-
replacement characters already standing there.
Well,
right?
yeah, the books have more replacement characters than they will ever need because the books have
I mean,
way too many characters.
It's one thing if you have like a main character and they meet someone and then you kill the main character and the someone they met is now the character.
So
right?
Scott, I'll put it this way.
But if you do a situation where it's like main character dies, let's go look at the other side of the world. Here's new people you've never met before. It's like, fuck that. You might as well just end it and
Scott,
you started a new book.
You will not like the Game of Thrones books then.
They do it that way?
The Game of Thrones books have all these threads that are way far apart from each other that barely interact and are leading towards some end, but because he's not our Scott Backer, I have no faith that that end is anything interesting.
Oh, okay.
But I'll put it this way. I'll put it in Prince of Nothing terms because it's worth noting.
Right. If there was a Prince of Nothing TV show and there was like a circumfiction episode, you wouldn't see people freaking out like this. How crazy could it be that people
It's
freak
not
out
that crazy.
so much?
This is what I'm getting at. No one who has read The Prince of Nothing would even blink at what happened in this episode. They would be like, wow, that was relatively tame, and the thousands of people who died was actually a relatively small amount of tragedy, all things considered.
Oh, wait, thousands died.
So
was it like as a gift to the people getting married? He's like, here, I have slaughtered an entire city for you.
Yeah, well, so what it would be like, so the first season of Game of Thrones, like a TV show, basically ends with the equivalent of if in the middle of like the second book, like toward the end of it maybe, of The Prince of Nothing, Nair, Conphus, and Kellis killed each other.
Nice.
Like out of nowhere. And then like Conphus, he ended up actually having a son and that kid was now king. Like some bullshit like that.
Okay.
This one is basically would be like if the entire Holy War's leaders were invited to a party with all of their personal guards and then all of them were murdered.
Including the guards?
Everyone. Every single one of them.
By
All their
a
guards,
wizard?
all their rulers, everyone. No, just by other assholes with swords. There aren't really
No.
wizards yet. There are dragons, but...
How are you going to kill that many badass dudes with just guys with swords?
Well, that's kind of what the whole plot is. But basically, forget all that. The details are irrelevant. Because if you go read the stupid Game of Thrones wiki, you're going to learn a lot about what was served at the dinner prior to what happened.
What the fuck, people?
But,
was it at least good food?
yeah, it was good food. And
Okay.
you would appreciate the plot that was done. But basically, the reason people are freaking out is because for the fifth or sixth time, the show killed a main character that no one expected to die because they're not reading the books. And more importantly, so many important characters were killed, and it was so sudden and out of nowhere and related to a thread they'd all probably forgotten about. It'd be like if in The Simpsons suddenly Homer and Marge just got killed.
Okay.
All right, and now the show's about Bart and Lisa moving into a foster home forever. Great. I think just the only people who freaked out are the people who've never read good or surprising fiction before.
Yeah, I mean, if you're watching TV, that shit doesn't happen on TV or movies, really. You know?
Now, then again...
Sometimes at the very end, but very rarely in the middle.
So, Scott, I mean, look at Escaflowne, right? There are moments in the anime Escaflowne.
Yeah, if you watched anime, that shit's not going to freak you out at all. You're like, oh, yeah, anime, yeah, people dying, freaking Full Metal Alchemist. Dude, like, Gennaro anime has shit like that.
But that stuff almost always happens at the end or at, like, a season finale in shows like that.
I'm just saying.
So I think American TV watching audiences
You've
are
seen Madoka,
unaccustomed.
you're like, whatever.
Yeah, they're unaccustomed to the death of prominent characters, especially characters played by big-name actors. They're very unaccustomed to major plot shifts.
Wouldn't they know the person's contract ran out?
Yeah, the nerds know that. These are all the normal water cooler types who are flipping out about this.
Okay.
I posit everyone who flipped out about this, like, was visibly shocked and going crazy on the internet, has never read The Prince of Nothing, has
never
not read
read
the books,
has
Yeah.
never watched real shows.
Yeah.
Or
Now,
movies.
then again, I mean, way back when I was watching Ava for the first time, had Twitter been available and had we all watched it at the same time, I think there would have been a lot of tweeting about it. But I don't know.
What episode of Ava would you be like?
Huh? What episode would I? Maybe the episode
Because, you know, every
about,
episode of Ava is...
when you find out about cloney bullshit. Like when you find that out for reals.
I sort of knew that was coming. That's so heavily foreshadowed.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
implied all over the place.
I just
Especially
find this
when
whole situation
She's all
amusing.
injured and then suddenly she's not injured.
Yeah.
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 It's like, whoa, okay. She's
Game of
getting
Thrones
beat the
not
shit up all the time.
Not the greatest with the foreshadowing. It's there, but usually it's just exposition while a butt is bouncing around on screen.
Oh, okay. So anyway, news. So it's just a quick news. Zynga lays off 520 employees. Closes several offices. Now everyone's like, oh my God, people are out of work. Yeah, you were not doing good work. You may be a good person. I'm maybe slightly sorry for you if you were the employee, but you agreed to work for Zynga, took their money, and participated in doing what I consider to be immoral labor, like as you were making things that are in and of themselves immoral.
Now, at the same
So
time,
I have really not too much sympathy, and yeah, fuck Zynga. I hope you go out of business completely.
you know, free speech, it's fine to make terrible games like that. It's fine to do what they do.
Yeah, I think it's. I just personally.
No, I'll put it this way. I put the people who lost their jobs in this situation, I feel for them about the same that I feel for someone struggling to get by who took a job making telemarketing calls.
Yeah, but
about the same level.
Yeah.
Oh, Zynga. Oh, I guess their stock collapsed.
Right. So it's interesting to me how, I'm so that, the free to play thing is obviously not working in a sense, but in another sense, it's weird. Like they just announced like Plants vs. Zombies 2 is going to be super free to play with pay money to get, I guess, more plants and shit. I don't know.
Well, super free to play does and can work. I think there's two things going on. All the things I would say about that are more video game news.
I know.
So to summarize them,
but the tech industry considers Zynga to be a tech company because they make their, they don't really make games.
That's what I was gonna say. They make games in the same way that Patty Cake is a game.
Right. But Plants vs. Zombies 1 was a game, and it's questionable whether Plants vs. Zombies 2 will be a game.
But I think one thing that I think happened here is that normal people who are not super hardcore gamers who just pay attention to this stuff have noticed that the games their kids are playing on the cell phones are asking for money.
Yeah.
I've talked to numerous parents in the last month who've said something like, man, I was playing X game and then it wanted me to give it $1 to buy a thing in the game. What the fuck? Like they finally noticed that that's what's going on. I think
what took you so long? It's only been, I don't know, 5 years.
Because I think it's because this is what I was getting at with part 2. It's similar to what happened during the video game crash in the 80s when the Atari and all those shitware games were out. There's so much shitware out now in terms of gaming, just like before. The shitware is the shittest tier of shit. And it'd be like if you're playing E.T. on the 2600, when you fall in the pit, you got to give it your credit card to get out of the pit. So it's 2 factors. It's shitware, and you have to pay money for that shitware. I think that's what's happening.
You should make a YouTube video where E.T. falls in the pit and he tries to use his neck to get up, and then when he reaches the top, he sort of runs out of energy and he falls down, and it says pay $1 to get more neck energy.
I can make that. I won't, but I could. I think that's what's going on. I think they're saturating the market with free to play. Free to play has already been a bad word among a lot of people in our circles. It's becoming a bad word in other circles too. Because if you go to some app store, which free-to-play game do you buy? It's Russian roulette. 90% of them are going to ask for $5 to get past the first screen.
I think they really need to start labeling their games as this one is pay to win, this one is not, right? Because Dota 2 is not pay to win. You can only buy really cosmetic shit. That's cool, even though I might not like Dota itself.
The thing is, the shitware games that people are noticing this the most are the games that you don't technically... They're single-player, for one. They may be social, but they're really just, they're like the Simpsons game. You sit there, shit happens. But like the Simpsons game, you could just wait, and they charge you money to not wait. I think poor kids whose parents won't let them unlimitedly charge the cell phone anymore are just waiting or not playing, as opposed to paying for
But there are also games, right, where just the numbers, right, depending on the game you're playing, like sometimes just waiting doesn't really matter, right? Like Bejeweled, you don't have to pay money for Bejeweled Blitz, right? Right? You can just keep playing it like crazy and it'll work, and you don't really have to wait that long to get power-ups to get a high score, right, to show you. And there's really no sort of end game you're going towards, like in a Simpsons or a Farmville. But there are other games where it's like, yeah, you can just wait. But assuming you have the highest efficiency possible and you sit here poking this thing 24/7, if you want all these things, you will have to wait like 13 years. And by then, we'll have new things that you don't have.
So I think the moral is you and me need to take Candy Box and monetize it.
Sure.
Pay $1 to increase your lollipop rate 4x.
Yeah. For anyone who doesn't know JavaScript.
The thing is, we didn't really review you don't need to know JavaScript to win Candy Box because there's one other option. Just wait a day to eat the motherfucking marshmallow. If you just wait a day, you'll have enough to do everything. You don't have to do it. You don't even have to cheat. You just have to have the discipline to not click on it right the fuck now.
Progress Quest.
At least World Progress Quest problem is that there's no button to click to put money in.
We should just take Progress Quest, fork it, and have $1 to get a level.
Totally Dollar Quest?
Yeah. Should make a website, Dollar
Progress.
I'm going to make a website, Dollar Quest, because that guy made Cow Clicker, and that sort of started out as that joke, and it ended up actually becoming popular.
If you accept Bitcoins, then we're on.
Right. Let's make, just Dollar Quest. And see what happens.
Yeah, I gotta have leaderboards, get some art in there. So, don't be creepy is the headline that pretty much everyone used for this. Google Glass, the guidelines for writing
the thing
apps
we want real bad
have been updated in a way that bothers me, but not for all the reasons you might think. To quote, you will not use the camera or microphone to cross-reference and immediately present personal information identifying anyone other than the user, including use cases such as facial recognition and voice print. Applications that do this will not be approved at this time. Now, we know exactly why Google made that change.
Because people are freaked.
No. Because Congress is currently investigating them and asked them a number of ridiculous questions about the capabilities of this technology. And Google,
Congress is full of fuddy-duddies.
So Google needed to be able to say, no, it cannot do that to Congress. And it will not be a lie if it can later do that. So I understand why Google did this while the actual thing that they did is bullshit.
Yeah.
It's the same reason the obviously atheist political candidate will go to church for the few months before the election. I can look at that guy and be like, I know what you're doing.
It's sort of weird, right? I feel like sometimes like I'm the only geek, it was like you look at like the EFF, right? And that's like the Geek Political Action Organization, right? And a lot of the things they stand for, it's like new bill in Congress unlocking technology. Yeah, I like that, right? President foreshadows new intervent surveillance proposal. Okay, government's, Fifth Amendment. Yeah, okay. No DRM. Yeah, I like that too. But they always do like this privacy stuff. Then like they would be against, Glass, like looking up people. And I'd be like, no, fuck that.
Now, here's the thing. Let's go back up all the way to the ideological point. From my perspective, fuck you. I do what I want with my technology.
Yeah, if you
make a law about privacy of databases or accessing information that other people have made available in certain ways, that's fine. But if I have a device and I have my facial recognition software, that just means that if they ban it from normal people, only nerds will have those capabilities.
That's the Linux situation, right? That's what free software is all about, is you can't tell me what bits to run on my technologies. Right? I actually made a tweet that I thought was funny when people were discussing this.
Yeah.
And it was sort of like, I think it was people were concerned, right, that if they wore glass in public, that people would be like freaked out by them or react to them in a positive and or negative way, right?
Yep.
And I'm sort of like, well, imagine Spider-Man swinging down the street, right? And you read a Spider-Man comic, right? Like a basic generic Spider-Man comic. He swings down the street. Some people are like, yeah, go Spider-Man, saving the day, all right. And some people are like reading the Daily Bugle that J. Jonah Jameson edited that says, evil Spider-Man terrorizes town. And they're like, fuck you, Spider-Man terrorizing our town. And that's what wearing Google Glass is like. It's like you're Spider-Man. And some people are like, Glass, you're awesome. And some people are like, get away from me, you privacy database lookup person.
I think it'll be pretty easy to use it as a sort of friend sorter that people who cannot deal with me wearing Google Glass, I really just won't see often.
Right, but it's like, that makes me want to wear the Google Glass because it's like, instant idiot filter. It's like, I'm becoming a superhero. And if you are afraid of superheroes and don't want to become one yourself, fuck you. Stay in your old 20th century.
Now, what's really
Get
interesting
off my world.
Is that this sort
Take
of
your time
thing,
machine and go back.
It's a lot of the older nerds that
What are you
going
to do when it's Ghost in the Shell?
Are very they say they're like very techno whatever and like we're on the bleeding edge of technology, but then they always will back away from that cliff as they get older. They'll always be like, maybe it did go too far. Oh, I didn't foresee this. How do you get that way? How do you go from being on the bleeding edge when you're 17 to being afraid of everything that came out after you turn 30?
There might be a biological thing towards conservatism when you get old.
I think there is, but I don't
averse.
think it's that you become conservative.
Right.
I think that you stop at a point.
Yeah, I can definitely say it's not from reading sci-fis that warn about and play gods, because I've read fucking all of those.
I know.
Right? And I am like, yep, I read like 100 sci-fi books that said you and play gods. And
Dude,
you know
I
what?
simultaneously...
Yeah, I am play gods. Let's go. See what happens.
I simultaneously want Immortal Robot Body and have seen a bunch of Galaxy Express 3.9.
I also would like Robot Body, but less so, but I'm not completely against Robot Body. And I've seen all of Galaxy Express 39. I've seen almost every show that, what's his name? Why can't I remember his name right now?
Leiji Matsumoto?
Yeah, Leiji Matsumoto. I've seen almost every show he's done ever.
See, I was wondering, because the fact you didn't bring the name to the tip of your tongue, I wondered if you were going to refer to someone else, like Rintaro.
It's just hard to, sometimes, it slips the brain. That's why I need Google Glass. It would have shown up immediately. I would have been like, Google Glass, director of Galaxy Express 39.
With technology, it's like people are still mostly afraid of the surveillance capabilities of Glass. Like, the other thing you can't do is turn the display off when it's recording. One, I want it to record 24/7. Battery is the only thing that will stop that from happening.
I already record my commute every single one GoPro. The only thing that stops me is storage space that my NAS isn't even half full yet, though.
But the people who are afraid of that, it's like they're afraid of the most simple, direct, like immediate term use case and have no vision of anything even a millimeter beyond that in terms of advancements. The dash cam thing, we already have for like $200. You can buy a camera that you can hide in your hat.
Most people just use GoPros.
No, but you can get tiny cameras that will record ridiculous amounts of video and surveil everyone around you all the time if you want. Glass actually is the worst possible way to do that because everyone knows you're wearing glass.
Yeah.
But if I have a device and I'm collecting data, I can do what I want with that data for me. And there's pretty much nothing that will stop me.
If you go into a secured place where they search your body before you go in.
Well, the thing is, when I get glass, what I'll probably do is just not eat at restaurants that don't allow it in. And the only times I'll take it off are when I go to like a courthouse.
The shower.
Yeah, I won't wear it in the shower because it's probably not super waterproof.
Yeah. If it runs out, I have to recharge it.
Yeah, the battery doesn't last that long yet either. But
yeah.
But yeah, it's funny how many people are happy that Google made this change.
Soon enough, glass will just be a replacement eyeball. And when I get cataracts, I'll just get those.
Yeah. But there's so many things we can talk about here, but it really just comes down to the fact that I'm amazed at how many people are so afraid of this, but the things that they're afraid of are the least revolutionary things it can do.
Because anyone who has revolutionary thinking would be someone who is in favor of it. Anyone who's against it is going to be a backwards technological person who is not forward-thinking and futuristic.
I mean, the basic use case of glass, the first thing anyone smart thought of was, wow, I could recognize people in places automatically and have that data available all the time.
See, I think we need some sort of intermediary system before we get to to that. What we need is sort of like your phone basically broadcasts your identity, and then other people's phones, sort of like the DS Street Pass. So I can maybe hold up my phone and look at the screen, and the camera is looking at everybody in the subway car, and over each person, it'll have information. I could tap on the people to get their thing because they're broadcasting it from their phone, right?
That's shades of the end of the first season of Durara.
Right, we need something like that to start out with, and you could, that'd be totally awesome, right? Like, imagine if I'm standing on the subway just listening to music, waiting to get to my stop, right? Someone holds their phone up and looks at me, and it's like, Scott Rubin, Geeknights podcast, nerd, geek, listening to this music right now.
Wait, so maybe
this is the music that's on his iPhone. Do you want to listen to any of it? Tap here. Here's the movies.
So Scott,
here are YouTube videos. Tap them to play them.
Is that the app? If the privacy stuff is going to prevent the sort of built-in first rounds of features, do we or not we, the royal we, do the smart nerds just make it an opt-in system so everyone who's in has this automatic connection to everyone else who's in, and maybe you even set people who don't know aren't on my friends list can see X, Y, and Z, and people who are on my list can also see that picture of my penis.
Yeah, but it's just a way to broadcast sort of your
exactly. But imagine augmenting that with Google Glass.
Public physical space.
Suddenly, we don't even need the facial recognition to do a lot of the things we want to do. Because
why can't I aim the camera at a restaurant and it'll be like, whoop, right there. It shows me all the info about the restaurant that I just looked at in the camera.
Yep.
Because the restaurant's broadcasting its profile.
Couldn't I get around this? Because it says, don't use the camera or microphone to cross-reference and immediately present personal information identifying anyone other than the user. What if I delay it by a second?
Okay.
Yeah, Google will probably just say yeah, whatever, and not let me in anyway, but anyone who is happy about this news is stupid because either they think that this will stop us or they are afraid of this. But anyway, things of the day. This is an old thing that came back, and it was on Slashdot recently, so I realized it's a good candidate for a Monday rather than a Tuesday. You all may know the famously bad, notorious old game called E.T., the Extraterrestrial, on the Atari 2600. The game is bad. I'm not going to say it's not bad, but it isn't really significantly worse than most other games on the 2600.
Oh, you're coming around to my position.
I've always had that position.
Okay, because people are like, oh my god, E.T. is the worst. And I'm like, look, E.T. is not a good game, but E.T. is not even close to the worst.
People who freak out about how bad E.T. is are the same people who freak out about how bad Castlevania 2 is. Like, yes, you are right. Those games are both bad, but not for any of the reasons you say they're bad. E.T. is an Atari 2600 game, and programming for something like that is way different from the kind of programming most of you have probably ever done. You can't just change anything easily. It's already written, and say you want to let's change the code. Let's make him green instead of blue or something. You can't even do the kinds of things you would do in an NES ROM. So this is an extremely detailed breakdown of the actual code in this game and the hex values to change to make the game objectively better.
Yeah, I mean, E.T., for all its badness, and that's, sort of just part of the game, there's badness that doesn't have to be part of the game. Like, when E.T. walks near the holes in the ground, you'll fall in when it doesn't look like you should have fallen in.
But the reason for that...
You won't fall in when it looks like you should have.
But this article gets into good reasons as to why that is, because the way you coded stuff, there weren't frame buffers or anything. You would just manually draw the entire screen. And if you wanted to detect a collision, you would basically draw the screen and check for pixels to be overlapping.
Yep.
Like that level of bullshit. There's a great moment when you scroll down in this thing where in order to free up enough bits to be able to add a slightly more complex behavior to a function somewhere, he did that by reducing the granularity of the graphics on one of the dudes that walks around.
Yeah, the FBI guy?
Yeah, by reducing his graphical load, he freed up a bunch of bits that he could then use to put function stuff in.
This is real programming, people.
Yeah, this is the kind of stuff that if you're in college right now, you should try to learn something like this.
It was so weird because when I was in college, I was actually I didn't 100% in my brain consciously understand the assembly stuff. But I got A's in all those classes, and I remember going to the lab with all the VT100s, hooked up to who knows what machines, right? Writing VAX assembly or some shit. And I'm sitting in the lab, and everyone else is doing the lab, and our project is due, next day or something. And I finish, and I walk up and get out, and everyone else is still sitting there, and I'm like, whoa, I thought I was not good. I didn't really understand what I did. I just sort of hammered it till it worked. I guess I have sort of this weird, I'm good at it, but I don't know, or, I don't know if I could do it now. I'd need a book or something.
Here, I'll read you a sentence here. Where are we going to find an extra 4 bytes?
In an Atari cartridge, you're lucky to have 1 byte. 4
bytes is a big deal in this thing. This is a great article.
I mean, there's only a few thousand bytes in the freaking cartridge.
What's cool is that that he actually did it. I mean, this is working code. You can download the bin where he made his changes. You can just look at the code. It's just a bunch of hex.
You should get one of those flashable Atari cartridges and play it on our Atari.
That would be kind of epic.
Yeah.
But yeah, this is pretty cool. So what do you got for me?
Oh, so this guy, he sort of made this 3D animations, but it's more like a kinetic sculpture, right? It's we tend to think of kinetic sculptures as like a physical sculpture that moves in real life, right? But what if you made a sculpture in 3D digitally on a computer and you just move the camera around the sculpture, right, to sort of look at it? It's like, it's like a virtual sculpture, the same way a JPEG is a virtual painting in the art museum, right? So the thing that's interesting is the way he generated these sculptures is he took sort of like these Street Fighter characters, like Guile, Ken, right, Ryu, Blanca, Chun-Li, and he turned them into sort of like a pile of particles and then made them move and do their moves, leaving a trail behind them, and then sort of that trail is like painting into the three-dimensional space, like using a three-dimensional object, a Street Fighter fighter, as a brush, right, to paint a three-dimensional sculpture as it moves. Pretty cool. It's a Vimeo staff pick. Ooh, I guess that means it's good. If you like Street Fighter, if you like arts, 3Ds, you'll like this videos.
It is pretty cool.
It's cool.
In the meta moment, the book club book is Player of Games, Ian M. Banks.
Have you even started reading it?
Hopefully, whenever my jury duty starts, I will probably read all of it.
What if your jury duty doesn't happen?
Then I'll make time to read it because I have to read it.
It's been a while here
I've
since
been busy.
This has been selected.
I've been busy with stuff.
Uh-huh.
You gonna be able to keep clear what happens in that book versus the other books?
Yeah, pretty easily, yeah. They're so not even... It's not like, some Prince of Nothing or like a Lord of the Rings where it's like, when did one end and when did one begin? They're completely separate books, separate characters. They're just in the same universe.
Okay.
So there's no question at all.
All right, cool. I'll read it soon.
Yeah.
We're going to be at Kineticon doing a bunch of panels, running the
panels.
We're going to be at PAX Australia doing a new updated Beyond Dungeons and Dragons.
I guess those Australians don't know about indie RPGs.
And I think the Wombat Theater.
I don't know what sound a wombat makes.
I can't really describe the sound a wombat makes.
We can go on YouTube and find out.
We can.
Anyway, does it even make a sound?
I'm assuming it makes a sound. Most animals make some form of sound.
Some don't.
Yeah, but many do.
Anyway.
Other
metas?
We got a forum, we got video, we got stuff.
You should come onto the internet in Facebooks and Twitters and Google Pluses and YouTubes and all those places and look for Front Row Crew and Geeknights and find our shit and look for us.
Yep, if you're at a convention that you think we should be at, don't tell us, tell the convention.
That's right.
And beyond that, we got what? PAX Dev, PAX Prime.
I don't know about PAX Dev yet, but
and then PAX East again.
MagFest.
I'm looking forward to MagFest.
Okay. So, today's show is about testing, right? Specifically software testing, which has become a huge topic as of late, right? So,
it's been a huge topic as of late, I think,
for a couple years.
Because in the gaming industry, people try to get into the gaming industry by being QA testers.
That's sort of a separate issue, right? So there's all these issues related to testing that are all sorted together, right? There's the fundamental, like, what is testing? Should you do it? There's QA, there's unit testing, there's functional testing, there's test-driven development.
Yep. User acceptance testing, which is very distinct from quality assurance testing.
And there's the technological process, and then there's the, sort of job and industry of QA testing, which is the big game industry issue, right? These people slaving away, having webcomics made about them and stuff like that, right? Yeah. So I guess we should start at the beginning, right? So software testing, fundamentally, right, the core idea is that a computer is input, processing, output, right? So what you do when you want to confirm that a software, this code that is doing the processing is correct, is you write by hand, quotes by hand, a tape, an input tape. You run it through the, process, and you get the output tape. Then you have another output tape that you also wrote by hand. That's basically the right answer. And you compare the output tapes and see if they match. If they don't match, either you were wrong in the output tape you wrote by hand or the program is wrong. And you just keep running through different input tapes and match them up to the appropriate output tapes. And they should all match. And if they all match, then you're good.
Now, obviously, it's basically impossible for modern complex software to have a set of input and output tapes that covers every use case.
Yes, it's not possible to cover every conceivable input, right? It's like, because there's
think if there's a GUI,
infinite
did
inputs.
Someone click on element A, then B with a 1.8 millisecond pause?
Right, a 1.87 millisecond pause.
Yep.
Right? Stuff like that, you can't test every possible iteration, but you can test enough. For example, let's say there's a box that someone can type into, right? Well, obviously, there's infinity different things they can type into the box, but you can have them type in letters, numbers, letters with spaces, letters with weird characters, letters, numbers, and weird characters, mixing capitals and lower cases, enough different combinations of things can be typed into the box that you're satisfied that the box is working properly, right? With pretty much almost anything that's going to happen, right? And what really you're not going for is every possible input. What you're going for when you're testing is what's called coverage, which is every line of code in your program being executed at some point, right? Because let's say I have a program and the program's like, take in an input. If it's all numbers, do this. If it's all letters, do that. And if it's neither, then do the third thing. So there's 3 possible things it can do, right? So if I only test it with letters, that's 2/3 of my code that's not being tested because those 2 things never happen.
Yep, and say you don't test it for 3 versions and something breaks and no one notices.
Right. When my tests I need to have enough tests that all 3 of the possible cases of the software will happen at least a few times in, different tests so that I know all the different parts of the code are working because the tests touch all the parts of the code. All right. And the goal is, quote, 100% coverage, which is sort of not achievable, but, you can go for it.
Well, there's a sort of more useful metric of 100% functional coverage, meaning you cover this is mostly for software that has some user interface.
Right, so this is the difference between the unit testing and the functional testing,
well,
right?
Here's a better way to do it.
The unit testing is you're basically testing the bits of code with other code. Like you have a function and you have another piece of code and all that piece of code does is like a test code.
But Scott,
and it just calls the function.
Who QAs the QA?
Dun, dun, dun. But then a functional test is from the front end. So like someone playing the video game, that is functional testing, right? But somebody who is basically manually executing the draw character function with different inputs, or usually that's automated, like another program will run and poke at your code. That's unit testing. It's just code executing one part of the code.
Let's start from like the closest to the code and all the levels. Like, it's like dev test, and then there's unit testing, and then QA, and then UAT, and like what should be tested.
Well, some of those are technological processes, and some of them are sort of like organizational things.
But if we're going to do that, I guess we should start with TDD, because I guess the test comes before the code in that case.
Right, well, that's the rage lately. There's a whole clan.
Test-driven development.
Right, there's tons of people on the internets in the dev programming communities who are really pushing test-driven development. They've been pushing it for years. And what the idea of test-driven development is that you're going to write a program. You write a test first. Then you write the program, then you run the test to make sure the test works, and then you've written the program
Now,
properly.
an analogy would be in, like, if I'm designing, like, a function in something we're doing, and I design, like, the GUI for it, and then the only documentation I write is what the output should be for every input. No code or anything. I just write, here's basically...
So let's say I'm writing an adding function, right? So I say, well, if the inputs are 1 and 1, the output should be 2. If the inputs are 1 and 2, the output should be 3. If the inputs are 3 and 3,
like
the output
Scott's
should
tapes,
be 6.
I make a list of inputs and a list of outputs that are guaranteed to match up.
So I do all that first. Then when I go to write the adding function, I'm like def add input 1, input 2... input 1, return input 1 plus input 2. And then I can run all those tests. And if they all have thumbs up, then I know that the code I wrote matches what I was intending to do in the first place.
I'll admit, I feel like what usually happens in places that follow that to any reasonably strict degree is junior developers not seeing the forest for the trees and writing to some test. And you have all these little compartmentalized pieces of code that may not be the most efficient overall architecture. And I think it's used primarily by people who either hire a lot of developers fresh out of college because they're used to the, like, did your project pass the test? Like that kind of cycle where, you guys are IT, you guys would keep submitting your code, and then finally you or Alex or someone would be like, oh, it passed, now we can play games.
Yep. See, here's the case I make for testing, right? Testing is not in and itself bad, right? There's a lot of ways.
Testing is more important than the development.
Right. Even test-driven development has cases where you should use it, right? And it pretty much comes down to this. Number one, let's say you're like a consultant and you're making a software for someone and you're going to give it to them and they're going to maintain it, but they might mess it up. You deliver tests with that. And that way, you deliver your program with tests, automated tests. And then if they call you up for support later and say it's not working, you tell them to run the tests. And if the tests fail, you can say, you fucked it up. When we gave it to you, all those tests were working.
Yep.
Right?
It's also very useful if you have projects that can be broken down into relatively small chunks that you're giving to different people who might even be siloed from each other.
Like Apple products.
Yeah, or like if you outsource.
Yep.
And
Another
if you do
thing,
that, then you basically need to reasonably know that when the code comes out of whoever you gave it to, it at least does what it says it's supposed to do. It might not be fast, it might not be great, but it works, so you don't waste time seeing if it worked. You don't have to do code review at that early stage.
Right. Another thing is if your certain kinds of code are really good at being tested, right? So if you're writing, I guess I'll stick with my pocket calculator example, right? It's really easy to write tests for a pocket calculator. It's so straightforward. The input tapes are small and the output tapes are small, and it's easy to write a lot of them. So testing that is very easy, and it's also something you don't want to get wrong because, it's pretty important, right? Or what if you were making, say, I don't know, a medical device like an x-ray machine? Yeah, I ran some really fucking, serious tests on that x-ray machine so you don't fucking kill anybody.
Yep,
Pretty
and guys,
important.
Radiation machines, due to bugs that were not caught in QA, have killed people.
Yeah, airplanes have bugs. What was that thing with the batteries and the whatever? Yeah, that's why
what was the name? There was that one radiation machine that basically dosed a ton of people with crazy death.
Yeah.
Because the code had a bug and it left a filter open that shouldn't have been open.
Anything that's super important like that, tests are mandatory. Super testing. Probably more testing than coding is necessary.
Because I'm more on the business side and the operational side of all this, but I'm also like the product manager, at least in my company. I make a distinction. Basically, we have at the developer level, you have a separation of duties. Like developers themselves are responsible for a certain degree of the testing. And then the development team as a whole is responsible for like one layer up. And then there's other teams for higher level testing. So for me, dev testing is like they're sitting there in their IDE, they write whatever code. They poke at it and make sure it just works if they have a local build.
What developer doesn't poke their code? Just write something, presses Control Save, and says submission, and they didn't even run it once?
Yeah, I see that.
Yeah, that's someone who should just be fired immediately.
I've seen that in my life. I'll put it this way.
I've never actually seen that in my life.
Actually,
but if
not
you did
so much
that,
in my current company, but at a certain other company I worked for. But at our company, right over the build server, we have this poster. It's the Dos Equis guy, and it's like, I don't always test my code. But when I do,
wow,
it's in production.
It's like, seriously, you write some code, you press run to see if it runs. That's how it goes.
I mean, that's kind of like most people when they're writing code, especially if you're not like, I don't know, some sort of savant. You write the code and you hit run because it doesn't work the first time.
Lately, it's been getting more and more often. I press run and it just works every time.
Yeah, that's a good feeling.
When it happens too much, it's frightening.
But I consider that to be dev testing, and I believe, and unit testing is sort of one step beyond that.
Unit testing is an automation.
Yeah, you formalize automated testing of code. So someone commits some code. Well, then maybe you're using Jenkins, like that kind of environment. Yep. So a build gets made, the build finishes, and in the course of the build, all these unit tests run against the current code base to see if anything broke that worked before.
Yeah, there's tons of software packages out there for testing different languages, different platforms, and Jenkins is what's known as continuous integration, which is basically you keep writing code, and every time someone submits code, it integrates the code and builds it and tests it, constantly as you're working, right? Some people even do constant deploy, where you constantly integrate, and if the build gets a thumbs up, it deploys. So you're basically constantly, as you're writing code, everything is updating all the time. And that can work depending on what your project is.
Now you can back off of that a little bit, and you can use the same kind of tools to people commit code. Occasionally, someone does a manual build to see if everything's good, and then they use that build for all further testing. Mm-hmm. That way, you're not testing something that someone fixed a minute later and no one talked to anybody.
Yep.
Beyond that, I don't like developers to have to do testing.
Yeah.
Beyond that level, you should have a separate QA team that ideally does not exist code like next to the developers.
Right, because if there's somebody who is capable of testing something, and most human beings who can use a computer are capable of functional testing, which is why one of the reasons for the industry problem of QA people not being paid enough, right, is that people are capable of doing it, but few are capable or willing of doing it well, right? But as long as they do it, it seems like a lot of people don't care.
So basically, if the guy who wrote the code is also the one testing it, he wrote the code. It's like if I draw the picture and then I critique the picture, it's easy for me to not see the obvious flaw or feel like I don't have to test it that thoroughly because I know it works. I wrote it.
Right. Also, at the same time, a developer you assume is capable of writing more code, and a tester you assume is not capable of writing more code. Therefore, if you can get the developer to just test it enough that they're not wasting the QA person's time with something that's obviously broken, right? They hand it off to someone else to test it thoroughly while you increase efficiency because now the developer is writing something else now.
Yep, but
or maybe
the most common
fixing
problems
bugs
I
in something
see,
that was just tested the previous thing they wrote.
the most common problems in the industry of development seems to be either QA doesn't catch stuff or development doesn't test, wasting QA's time. Those seem to be the primary bottlenecks in QA world.
Yeah, we're not going to discuss all the issues that are obvious, like QA people and developers being underpaid and overworked and such. That's all awful, and you should just quit if anyone's doing that to you and find a real job.
But the key is that QA needs to be separate from development. In the very least, if you're a really small shop, if it's just me and Scott, if I write the code, Scott should QA it.
Yeah, if you just have two developers test each other's shit, right? And
well, I guess if you just have two, you could do pair programming.
No, that's bull. And then remember, the automated tests are like another person, right? So as long as you got some sort of automated testing that's going to check that shit. But here's the thing, right? I actually sort of disagree with a lot of these people on the internet that are all like, testing is the best. You need to have tests for everything, right? It's like
tests, yes. Unit tests, maybe not.
Right. These people, the test-driven development people, right, especially, they want write tests from the beginning and write tests for everything all the time on every project. And I'm like, dude, I'm writing just like a fucking website here for like a restaurant. Who knows what, right? Pretend a restaurant website. A restaurant was smart, didn't want an ugly, old-fashioned website, wanted a modern website that's actually usable, and they hired me to make it, right? I'm not writing tests for that shit. It's a fucking restaurant website. Are you serious? It's not the end of the world. It's not the X-ray machine that's going to kill people, right? And the amount of time it would take me to write tests to actually cover that, are you kidding me? I could finish the restaurant website in like an hour.
But at the same time...
And if there's a bug, okay, they'll find out later and I'll fix it in like 2 seconds.
But at the same time, if you completely push unit testing and dev testing out of the way and just write the code, you're going to keep reinventing the wheel and revisiting issues over and over again. Or if there is a thing that's prone to breaking because it's complex, writing a bunch of unit tests for that area that's highly prone to regression once will save you a ton of time in the long run, but maybe you don't need unit tests for the basic stuff.
But I'm saying there's nothing complex or dangerous or essential in a restaurant website, right? And these people, these testing people, they're so crazy about testing and so passionate about it. It's like they're on a mission for like the testing army.
In my industry, and when I worked in the hospitals before, I would really like those kinds of people doing my QA.
Yeah.
Because there are a lot bigger consequences. Like,
yeah, with money and with health. Yeah, kind of important. Yep. Right? It's the same people who are like, you got to use Postgres. Oh my God, using MySQL, are you insane? And I'm like, it's a shitty website with just like some blog photos and shit on it.
Yep.
Who gives a crap if
Use
it's MySQL?
the tool that works.
Right. If I had a bank and someone was using MySQL, they'd be fired immediately. Right? Are you kidding me? But if I'm just running some crappy website, I don't need Postgres. It's just more work for why would I do more work for something so simple? That'd be like hiring F1 engineers, to fix my Chevy to go to work with. It's like, no, the lazy mechanic guy around the corner can do that.
So QA, the separated testing, really, you need people who understand what it is that they're testing. Now, you don't necessarily need those people to be the ones doing the actual tests, especially if it's sort of mechanical Turk, humans are doing the testing, because often it's cheaper to hire 10 dudes and have them click through and follow a script than it is to have one developer write the unit test equivalent of that. Mm-hmm. But you need at least the person who's managing all that to know the product or know the code and understand what is likely to cause a problem and what isn't. Because you can't give equal weight to testing everything in a large project, or testing will take longer than your already zero budget for it will allow. That's kind of the separate problem, that no one in the world seems to give quality assurance and testing nearly enough time or respect. The only thing that's shit on more than QA is documentation.
That's true for sure. The other thing is that a lot of people, they really want to make all the testing automated, right? Like everything, even functional testing automated, right? And to a certain extent, like there are tools, like you can use this Selenium thing to like test websites that like click on your website for you and stuff, right? I only see value personally in automating unit testing when the inputs and the outputs are relatively simple, right? When the inputs and outputs are complex, just testing for like a direct match, which is all an automated test can do, is not really, helping. First of all, those tests are really hard and time consuming to make, even with tools that help you. And second of all, you really need a human to interpret, right, the incredibly complex inputs and outputs, right? The input isn't just like the numbers 1 and 2 because you're testing an adding function.
Now, this is where you want to be semi-automatic. Make tools that allow, like, say you have a complex system where you have to stage in a bunch of data and then a user does something with it. Automate in the testing environment the staging of that data.
Yeah, of course, right?
And maybe even automate the testing on the other side if the person is going to follow a script, but the person doing, like, using the GUI, clicking on things, while he's doing the same things, he'll notice if, yes, this worked, but the button turned gray.
Right. And this is why you think most of the testing horror stories come from the video game industry, because video games, especially 3D ones, have highly complex inputs, and the outputs are also highly complex and just can't be compared directly. They need to be human interpreted. Like if your game is a racing game, it's like, okay, I turn left, and it's like, yeah, what are you going to do? Check the 1920 by 1080 screen to match the pixels against a picture.
Now you might say, why don't you just trust the code to test itself and it gives you the inputs and outputs? That's like trusting the security guard to not rob the bank. Yeah, he probably won't because there's all these other structures in place. Imagine a world where security guards are untouchable. Mm-hmm. Imagine a world where, if I wrote the code that tells you what you're seeing and the code is wrong, the code probably thinks it's doing the right thing. Not that the code's sentient, but its data stream might be consistent. It might make sense and be providing the technically correct outputs that don't actually work in the actual use case.
If you want to learn some computer science, you can look up this interesting thing called the halting problem. And it's basically this question is, can you write a program that can tell if another program is in an infinite loop?
So, spoilers, I guess, you know what, guys, go look up the answer.
Yeah, go read the Wikipedia page about halting problem, and you'll see some of the problems with, testing.
I remember one time at RIT, we wanted to go to, like, Bill Gray's or something, and you submitted some
I'm so
project.
Hungry, even though Bill Gray's is kind of I'm so hungry.
To the computer science whatever server for test, and it just didn't, like, it was running. It was like, I guess it failed, and you gave up. You're like, I guess I'll fail. And we all went out to eat. We went back to our dorm rooms, and I remember you noticing that the test had finished.
Yep.
It had just taken a long time.
Yep. Everyone was trying to submit their shit at once.
Yep. But yeah, there's no way to know if Scott's code's in an infinite loop.
Yeah.
Spoilers. You can guess. Maybe you have a test where if this thing takes longer than an hour, let's assume that it got into a loop. Drop a stack, and then say the build failed.
Mm-hmm.
So beyond that, user acceptance testing, UAT, there is a difference between QA and UAT. A QA person will sit there and follow a very strict script of test this way, test this way. They're basically just doing a complex human version of unit testing. And maybe you'll focus them, like first they'll test all the changes that the developers made to this new version of something to make sure those things work the way they should, and then they'll test everything else to make sure it also works the way it should.
Right. That's the big thing a lot of people miss, right, is the regression test, right? It's like, let's say I update the homepage of the website. So everyone's testing the homepage to make sure it works. They're testing the homepage. But nobody went and tested, like, I don't know, the About page. And you know what happened? When I was messing with the homepage and updating it, I got it right. But I messed up the About page because I changed something.
That's why it's called regression testing. We're looking to see if your functionality has regressed, gone backward.
We did a thing on the About page. We fixed a problem there, but now that problem got unfixed by something else. But we wrote a test for that when we fixed it in the first place, and now that test is failing. And we say, aha, I remember when we wrote that test. It was because of this. And we know exactly where in the code to look because, aha, we fixed that before and it got unfixed. Let's fix it again because we re-broke it when we updated the homepage.
Now, these things things are the only things QA should be testing. QA might give guidance, might have opinions on things, but user acceptance testing is where the people you're delivering the code to, or, whoever it is who's making the higher level decisions, uses it as a user to see if it works in the way that they expect. So a QA bug would be something like when you click on the sync button, it just doesn't work. But a UAT bug would be, I can't get all of the data for my report to display on the screen at the same time.
That could be just you don't know what you're doing.
It could be.
That could be PEBCAK.
But then that's still an issue you would raise, because that's the situation of, is it because the documentation's bad? Is it because they're stupid? Is it because the interface is non-intuitive?
It's almost always PEBCAK.
Yeah, almost always. But even then, if you're selling to P, well, to problem, if you're selling to the person on the chair, interfacing with the keyboard,
you got to fix it somehow, so they give you their money.
Exactly.
To open the wallet, you have to still fix the PEBCAK.
But QA is internally making sure the thing is good. UAT is, hey, customer, here's the beta of the next version. Make sure it works for you. Make sure this build of Natural Selection 2, you can still be a gorge and do all your gorgy things.
Oh shit, all the fades, this happened in NS2 once. All the fades could just get blink, even though blink wasn't researched yet.
Lol.
That was pretty awesome. That was an awesome build. Everyone was playing just blinking everywhere, and the aliens were kicking everyone's ass. Yeah.
I imagine the first server where someone noticed that, and they were like, guys, I'll go fade. I'll fade. I'll fade.
It wasn't quite that bad, but yeah, it was a problem for a whole build.
But that's UAT. User acceptance testing is what UAT stands for. It is distinct from QA and distinct from dev testing.
Yeah. So there's this whole crazy world of testing that goes on. It has so many fucking different aspects to it and shit.
We could talk for hours about just like QA best practices. Like, how do you test different kinds of things?
Right. But I think the fundamental thing here is that, personally, I feel that there's a huge push from testing coming from the programming community. And I think that a lot of that pushing is correct. Obviously, I want my, surgery machine to be tested incredibly thoroughly, and the spaceship and who knows what else. But I think it's a waste of time to test something like a restaurant website or, a simple Flash game or something. Because it's like, seriously, the amount of time it's going to take you to write tests, you could have just, fixed the bugs after when you release it or whatever.
You have to do a cost-benefit analysis. You have to decide, how much will it hurt me if the thing that I'm building doesn't work when I give it to someone?
Yeah, I can tell you in that 100% of the work that I have done personally in the real world, writing tests would have taken longer than doing it.
Dude, I'll tell you this, writing the script to test something, like writing the list of here are the things to test and the basic idea of how to test them takes longer than writing the code for the things you want to test.
Exactly. So I would get half as much, things done. And the thing is, it's weird, right? The stuff is not too complicated. So yeah, it's like, I sit around not doing much. I could have write some tests in that free time, maybe, or if I wanted to, but I don't need to because my shit's working, even without those tests.
Yep. But I guess I see that push and I'll take advantage of it, because on the other side, for large software projects, like enterprise software and just a lot of even games, bugs just are everywhere because people don't test, or they test really inefficiently. A lot, especially in the video game industry, there's this kind of, the people who want to get in the video game industry, they basically end up being testers
because that's the job that they can do.
It's
if
the
you don't have
no-skill job.
If you don't have programming or art skills or anything.
But the people who can direct that testing, the people who would run the whole QA farm for a game, probably could also either write the code or design the system in the first place, and they'll make way more money doing that. So it's hard to keep good people managing testing. And the people who are actually doing the testing, rightfully or wrongfully, are not valued by the company.
Especially since it's pretty much a matter of, there's people desperate scabs, basically. There's not a union, but, there's other people who want that job, are willing to do it. And so if you
say jump, I'll say how many times.
Right.
This has been Geek Nights with Rim and Scott. Special thanks to DJ Pretzel for the opening music, Kat Lee for web design, and Brando K for the logos.
Be sure to visit our website at frontrowcrew.com for show notes, discussion, news, and more.
Remember, Geek Nights is not one, but 4 different shows. Sci-Tech Mondays, Gaming Tuesdays, Anime Comic Wednesdays, and Indiscriminate Thursdays.
Geek Nights is distributed under a Creative Commons Attribution 3.0 license. Geek Nights is recorded live with no studio and no audience. But unlike those other late shows, it's actually recorded at night.
It's Monday, June 3rd, 2013. I'm Rim.
I'm Scott.
And this is Geek Nights. Tonight, testing.
Let's do this. That's
Was
good.
that better?
Yeah,
Was that a better opening?
Yeah, you didn't say a bunch of extra words for no reason.
Tonight on Geek Nights, test-driven development testing,
doesn't
unit
matter
test,
now.
quality assurance,
We're already past that part.
User
so you can say
acceptance
whatever as many
testing.
words as you want now. It's the opening bit.
pre-production staging.
Opening bit has no word limit, so it's all good.
No word limit, eh?
There's a time limit, not a word limit.
So
Get Micro Machines guy in here; he'll show you.
I'll say this: I wonder if we could get him on Geek Nights.
Is he dead?
He's probably. I can't imagine he's still alive.
Hold on, I'll look it up. You
Okay,
talk.
so I enjoyed because I do not enjoy the
Not
Game of
dead.
Thrones books, but I do enjoy the story of Game of Thrones to a degree. Kind of like how I think the Harry Potter books are written for imbeciles, but I really like the story of Harry Potter. I just can't read those books.
I don't know. I can't read them either, but I kind of like a few of the, like that bother thing.
Exactly.
That was okay.
Oh, no, but that's the fan stuff.
Yeah.
The fan stuff is
I mean,
hit or
that could have
miss.
been it didn't have to be Harry Potter, right? Anything with bother would have been funny.
Basically, that's just fan fiction, what you like there.
Well, it's really just that one
But that
thing
one
they
thing
say.
is
It's
that
really
not-
not even the whole thing. It's just, what you could have been any character. It could have been like any puppet going, bother, just saying that.
But
sort
is
of like
that-
badger, mushroom.
It was still fan fiction.
I suppose.
Anyway, but no, I like the story. I just don't like her writing. So Game of Thrones, same thing. If I'd never read The Prince of Nothing and any other sort of serious, gritty fantasy, I might have more tolerance for the Game of Thrones, but I have no tolerance for it.
At
but the
least
show,
it's Game of Thrones that's popular.
basically, you're right in a sense, but basically, the
Well,
show
I mean,
is
it's
known.
once there's a thing called a red wedding and there's houses. I mean,
The show is known, and the books are known for two things. One, they will kill main characters out of nowhere.
okay, good.
Which is
but they have
interest-
replacement characters already standing there.
Well,
right?
yeah, the books have more replacement characters than they will ever need because the books
'Cause,
have
I mean,
way too many characters.
It's one thing if you have like a main character and they meet someone and then you kill the main character and the someone they met is now the character.
So,
right?
Scott, I'll put it this
but
way.
if you do a situation where it's like main character dies, let's go look at the other side of the world. Here's new people you've never met before. It's like, fuck that. You might as well just end it and
Scott,
started
yeah.
a new book.
You will not like the Game of Thrones books then.
They do it that way?
The Game of Thrones books have all these threads that are way far apart from each other that barely interact and are leading towards some end, but because he's not our Scott Backer, I have no faith that that end is anything interesting.
Oh, okay.
But I'll put it this way. I'll put it in Prince of Nothing terms because it's worth noting.
Right, if there was a Prince of Nothing TV show and there was like a circumfiction episode, you wouldn't see people freaking out like this. How crazy could it be that people
It's
freak
not
out
that crazy.
so much?
This is what I'm getting at. No one who has read The Prince of Nothing would even blink at what happened in this episode. They would be like, wow, that was relatively tame, and the thousands of people who died was actually a relatively small amount of tragedy, all things considered.
Oh, wait, thousands died.
So
was it like as a gift to the people getting married? He's like, here, I have slaughtered an entire city for you.
Yeah, well, so what it would be like, so the first season of Game of Thrones, like a TV show, basically ends with the equivalent of if in the middle of like the second book, like toward the end of it maybe, of The Prince of Nothing, Nair, Conphus, and Kellis killed each other.
Nice.
Like out of nowhere. And then like Conphus, he ended up actually having a son and that kid was now king. Like some bullshit like that.
Okay.
This one is basically would be like if the entire Holy Wars leaders were invited to a party with all of their personal guards, and then all of them were murdered.
Including the guards?
Everyone. Every single one of them. All
By
their
a
guards,
wizard?
all their rulers, everyone. No, just, I think there would have been a lot of tweeting about it, but I don't know.
What episode of Ava would you be like?
Huh, what episode would I? Maybe the episode
Because, every episode of Ava is...
when you find out about cloney bullshit. Like when you find that out for reals.
I sort of knew that was coming. That's so heavily foreshadowed.
Yeah.
And implied all over the place.
I just find this whole situation
She's all
amusing.
injured, and then suddenly she's not injured.
Yeah.
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 It's like, whoa, okay. She's
Game of
getting beat
Thrones
the
not
shit up all the time.
Not the greatest with the foreshadowing. It's there, but usually it's just exposition while a butt is bouncing around on screen.
Oh, okay. So anyway, news. So there's just a quick news. Zynga lays off 520 employees. Closes several offices. Now everyone's like, oh my God, people are out of work. Yeah, you were not doing good work. You may be a good person. I'm maybe slightly sorry for you if you were the employee, but you agreed to work for Zynga, took their money, and participated in doing what I consider to be immoral labor. Like, as you were making things that are in and of themselves immoral.
Now, at the same
So
time,
I have really not too much sympathy. And yeah, fuck Zynga. I hope you go out of business completely.
free speech. It's fine to make terrible games like that. It's fine to do what they do.
Yeah. I think I just personally.
Well, no, I'll put it this way. I put the people who lost their jobs in this situation, I feel for them about the same that I feel for someone struggling to get by who took a job making telemarketing calls.
Yeah, but
about the same level.
Yeah.
Oh, Zynga. Oh, I guess their stock collapsed.
Right. So it's interesting to me how, I'm so that, the free to play thing is obviously not working in a sense, but in another sense, it's weird. Like, they just announced like Plants vs. Zombies 2 is going to be super free to play with pay money to get, I guess, more plants and shit. I don't know.
Well, free to play does and can work. I think there's two things going on. All the things I would say about that are more video game news.
I know.
So to summarize them,
but the tech industry considers Zynga to be a tech company because they make their,
because they buy other assholes with swords. There aren't really wizards yet. There are dragons, but
how are you going to kill that many badass dudes with just guys with swords?
Well, that's kind of what the whole plot is. But basically, forget all that. The details are irrelevant. Because if you go read the stupid Game of Thrones wiki, you're going to learn a lot about what was served at the dinner prior to what happened.
What the fuck, people?
But
was it at least good food?
Yeah, it was good food. Okay. And you would appreciate the plot that was done. But basically, the reason people are freaking out is because for the fifth or sixth time, the show killed a main character that no one expected to die because they're not reading the books. And more importantly, so many important characters were killed, and it was so sudden and out of nowhere and related to a thread they'd all probably forgotten about. It'd be like if in The Simpsons suddenly Homer and Marge just got killed.
Okay.
All right, and now the show's about Bart and Lisa moving into a foster home forever. Great. I think just the only people who freaked out are the people who've never read good or surprising fiction before.
Yeah, I mean, if you're watching TV, that shit doesn't happen on TV or movies, really.
Now, then again,
sometimes at the very end, but very rarely in the middle.
So, Scott, look at Escaflowne, right? There are moments in the anime Escaflowne.
Yeah, if you watched anime, that shit's not going to freak you out at all. You're like, oh, yeah, anime, people dying, freaking Full Metal Alchemist. Dude, like, Gennaro anime has shit like that.
But that stuff almost always happens at the end or at, like, a season finale in shows like that.
I'm just saying.
So, I think American TV watching audiences
You've seen Madoka, you're like, whatever.
Yeah, they're, unaccustomed to the death of prominent characters, especially characters played by big-name actors. They're very unaccustomed to major plot shifts.
Wouldn't they know the person's contract ran out?
Yeah, the nerds know that. These are all the normal water cooler types who are flipping out about this.
Okay.
I posit everyone who flipped out about this, like, was visibly shocked and going crazy on the internet, has never read The Prince of Nothing, has never read the books,
has never watched real shows.
Yeah.
Or
now,
movies.
Then again, I mean, way back when I was watching Ava for the first time, had Twitter been available and had we all watched it at the same time.
And not In the Name of the Wind.
Oh, my God.
Imagine if that was the TV series. That
Scott, you didn't read that second book.
I own it though.
Yeah, that was a mistake. You want to read about a lot of sex with kung fu ninja masters who have very liberal attitudes on sex?
No, because as soon as I finish the book I'm reading now, I'm going to go back to reading the comics that are piling up everywhere.
But I got, I saw the title of the upcoming episode of Game of Thrones. I've only watched season 1 of the show. I liked it.
Watched episode 0, not any episodes.
It's
ever.
a good show. It's one of those things where
I played the board game.
I've played the board game too. It's an okay game.
I've heard comments about game, and I basically have just gleaned a small amount of knowledge about it from sources.
What you came to when we got here and we started the show, you were like, "So what the fuck happened?"
Right, because basically the internet exploded today, right? And everyone's talking about, oh my God, Game of Thrones last night, crazy shit went down, and they're freaking out, and they're talking about this red wedding, and I couldn't really find anyone actually describing what happened because everyone's so fucking spoiler averse.
Yep.
Right? And I'm like, okay, red weddings. There must have been a wedding. Based on what I know about the show, there must have been a wedding, and a lot of, someone was killed at it, or maybe a bunch of people were killed at it, or the bride was killed, or there was killing going on at this wedding. Perhaps, I'm guessing, because I know in the show it's a medieval world with houses. I know that from the board game. Perhaps this was a wedding between two houses, and perhaps a third house did not like it. I'm guessing. And then I also know the other thing I know about the show is that there are dragons and a midget. So perhaps the dragons ate the midget at the wedding.
So if you ever do watch the show, and I wouldn't recommend reading the novels, the midget is probably your favorite character. I wish the show...
I know what I know of the midget is from your...
Goonies Game of Thrones?
Yes.
The thing is, the actual speech he gives in that video...
Well, you showed me that also.
...is basically the same as the Goonies speech.
Right, you showed me that also, so...
I knew what the Red Wedding was because much like with Harry Potter, I read all the spoilers for the books because I don't want to read the books.
Oh, so you found them. So tell me what the Red Wedding is.
No, I read the spoilers for the books when the book came out and that shit happened.
Oh, well, tell me what the fucking Red Wedding is.
So I won't spoil it for our listeners, but